In this video, we're going to take a look at installing content in DAZ Studio 4 in the PC environment. There seems to be some confusion with some people as to where content is supposed to go. Before we go into that, I want to show you. I'm going to go into my C drive. I'm going to go into the Programs Files folder and find DAZ 3D. And within this folder, you'll find your Content Management Service folders and files and your DAZ Studio 4 files. This is where the program is installed, and some products like scripts or plugins may by default want to install in this location, and that's perfectly fine. But for your props, scenes, clothing, characters, and so forth, you're going to find that in your users folder in your account under a folder called DAZ Content. I'm opening this up, and in here we've got all of the DAZ content that I have installed currently in DAZ Studio 4. This is where you're going to want to install your content. So this is in your users folder under DAZ Content. If the installer, if you bought it from DAZ, wants to install it into your core program folder, that's fine, allow it to, but everything else should end up here. That being said, I'm going to close that out, and I have some DAZ install files here. We're going to look at some of these. Let's see, what would be a good one for me to do? Why don't we install the Iron Gate and the Iron Gate's metadata. Now, both of these files, this was a free product from DAZ 3D, and I'm going to start by installing the metadata. And metadata is just basically files that work with your smart content. You don't necessarily have to install the metadata if you're not using your smart content tab. Default settings recommended. I'm going to click on custom installation because I want to see where this is going. Now, let's see, choose from a predefined mapped path. I click next, and this is going to put it into my users folder in the DAZ content directory. That's exactly where it should go. So I'm going to click next, and I do not want desktop shortcuts or smart menu shortcuts. Just install it. And here again, we'll see the content path. It's within your users folder in the DAZ content folder. And apparently I've installed this once before, so we'll just do this again. Finish installing, and we'll click finish. Now we will load in the prop itself. And it'll go through its install, and click next. Accept the agreement. Next. Default settings recommended. Let's see what this will put us, and it sticks us right in the content path into our users folder in our DAZ content folder. So that is where we want it, and we will install it there. So what I'm basically showing you is that for content, it's going into the DAZ content folder in your users folder. That's where you put your content. Some people have had problems trying to figure out which folder it should go into, and I think they're confusing the two. If you have an external drive where you're installing content, which I will show in a later video on my Mac, then it becomes a little trickier, but that was the principle is pretty much the same. Okay, now that was from install Vice file from a product that was purchased at DAZ 3D. Now, if we're going to install a product that we purchase, say, maybe at Renderosity or Runtime DNA, where they don't have an installer Vice file, we can do this manually. Now, this is a product from a merchant called Godin. It's a character file called Bernadette, and it's designed both for Victoria 4 and for the Genesis figure. And I have decompressed both folders. I've unzipped them, and this one is the Genesis version. I could tell because it says My Library. Now, the place to put this is we're going to have to open up another folder here. So we will go under computer. This one's going to go into users folder and DAZ content. There we go. Now it says My Library, but we don't have a My Library folder in here. So I'm going to double click on that to open it. And we have a file that says data, people, and runtime. And you'll see we have a data, a people, and a runtime here as well. So let's double click on the data. It says DAZ 3D, Genesis, Base, Morphs, Godin. Okay, and we can see the pathway up here. So we're going to go in here, data, DAZ 3D, Genesis, Base, Morphs, and we are going to simply drag this over into here, and that's now been copied. So let's go back and let's go under people, Genesis, characters, and we'll backtrack here. And we're going to people, Genesis, characters, and we will drag this folder over here and copy it. And finally, the runtime folder. Now the runtime folder will typically also hold any poser files. Runtime is something that Poser uses, and you can see here we have the basic Poser type folders, geometries, which would contain your wavefront OBJ files, libraries, which hold your character files, pose files, prop files, scene files, just about everything that's not DAZ Studio optimized, and of course your textures. And I know that for a fact that that's where this is going to go, so we'll open this up and condense this a little bit so I can maneuver a little better. And we're just going to click and drag this Godin folder over here because I do not have any Godin products over here. And I see that we had something in we had something in the libraries. Let's take a look. Morphs and pose files. So we will go into our libraries folder, and let's see, morphs. We have no morphs over here, so I can simply just grab this folder over. Otherwise, if there was a morphs folder here, I would double click on it and drop the correct folder in here. And pose, we do have a pose folder, and I'll open this up and we will drag in VH Bernadette, which is the name of the character, and it is copying over here. When you're doing this manually, if you're not using an installer application to install your poser type files into your destination folders, this is the way you have to do this, is just doing it manually. And of course, if you are doing it manually and you start accumulating products from certain artists, like for example, I do have a lot of products from Godin, I would have to open up the Godin folder and then drop the file in here. Merchants will package their products up the way they should be installed, so it's just a simple matter of following the pathways that have been established. They package them up the way they should be installed. Okay, well, now we're going to open up DAZ Studio 4 and take a look and see what happens. Now, if you install products and DAZ Studio is not activated, the first thing it'll want to do is, if there's any metadata files, it will find them and it'll ask if you want to include them, and just simply click yes, just include them, even though we're not really using our smart content. See that? Import content, and it's the iron gate, and we'll say OK and just allow it to do so. Alright. Now, I'm sure you've noticed that there are no new products appearing here. That sometimes happens, and the way to locate your new products is to go under this little icon here in the upper right hand corner of your content library folder and scan known directories for files. And you can leave these all ticked on. I'm going to click accept, and since I don't have a lot of product on this particular copy of DAZ Studio 4, it'll go rather quickly. And look at that. Now we have these nice highlighted blue tabs which show that we have content that's been found. And we'll go under characters, and look at that. There's the Bernadette character files, and there's the morphs, skin, makeup, lips, which come in two different versions. Okay, and as I've shown you before, when it comes to categorizing this, I'm going to click on this and then right click, create category from this folder and subfolders, and I want to put this under Genesis. Now I notice I don't have, no, this is clothing, I do not want it there, I want it under here, Genesis, accept. And if I go under my categories, I should find under people, Genesis, look at that, there it is. I could create a subcategory, and we'll call this characters. Click OK, and now I can simply left click and drag that up into this characters folder, and now I can store my Genesis characters within the subdirectory. Okay, and that seems to be the only thing that was new here. But I also see that we have some poser format files, and those would be the pose files that were also installed. So we'll look under DAZ content figures. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about the iron gate. Now, do I have a scene or props? No, I do not. So we'll create a subcategory, props. Click OK. And I'm going to create another subcategory called scene props, because some props will be used in scenes, some will be used for other purposes. I consider an iron gate to be a scene prop, so we will go back up here and figures, iron gate. I can rename this one to just iron gate. It'll make it easier for me to find it. And we're going to right click on that, create category from this folder only because there are no subfolders. And we're going to go to props, scene props. I'm going to highlight, click accept. And if we go back to categories, we should find the iron gate in there. Very good. Let's go back up to poser formats. That was the only figures. Light. There seems to be a set of lights for iron gate. Now I'm going to create this as a subcategory, because these are poser lights. We can tell by the .lt2 suffix on it. So I'm going to create a category from this folder only, and I'm going to open up scene props, and I'm going to click on iron gate to highlight it and click accept. And while I'm here, materials, rename this to, this is the beauty of using the content management system. Is that you can rename your folders so they make more sense to you. And again, we're just going to go to the Iron Gate, click Accept, Pose Files, and we'll rename this Iron Gate Pose, which are generally material pose files anyway. And we will create a category from it, and again it's going into the Iron Gate. Click Accept. I'm going to come back to Bernadette. I just want to now these are prop files. I'm going to handle this one differently. I'm going to create category from this folder only, but instead of putting it in Iron Gate, I'm going to go up one to Scene Props and click Accept. And what that will do is it'll merge this content in with my original Iron Gate directory, and that way the character and prop files will all be together. I'm going to go back here to Pose. We have our map pose files, and these are poser files. So I'm going to rename this one, and I'm just going to put a PS, Bernadette PS for poser. I may not necessarily use these. And this time, right click this folder and subfolders. And this time, we're going to go back up to People, Genesis, Characters, and I'm going to drop it into this VH Bernadette folder and click Accept. As a matter of fact, I can even go back to that directory and rename it to simply Bernadette, because that's the name of the character. Okay, and click OK. And you see the Bernadette PS folder that we just created is right here. These are the DAZ Studio optimized material settings. At least they should be. Okay, that's turning out better. Sometimes you may have to create categories twice. This and the subfolders. Actually, well, let's do the subfolders. I'm going to hold the shift key. Nope, the shift key will not let me do it. This folder and subfolders. And we'll click Accept. This may be embedded a little bit too deeply. Okay, yes, in subfolders. Accept. And one more. Sometimes if there's multiple nested folders, you may have to do things a couple of times in order for them to appear in your categories. And let's go back to People, Genesis, Characters. And there we go. That's a lot better. Okay. And once you've got your content installed, if you go back up to either DAZ Studio formats or poser formats and just right click on it, near at the bottom it says Mark All Content to Scene. Click on that and everything's set back so that the next time you install new content, it'll highlight your containers in blue to indicate that you have new content in there. And that is the long and short of installing content on DAZ Studio from a PC. In another video I'll go through the same process, but we'll do it in a Mac system.